everyone, and welcome to Sydney.net July. So we've got Phil today and Francis, and Phil is back after his talk in January, which was very well received, and I must say I learned a huge amount from it. So I'm really looking forward to today's talk. Now, we have the JetBrains licenses to give away as usual, so stay tuned. And just before we get into things, post a comment, please, to show that we're live and people are there and all the rest. Let's see, make sure it's all working before we get into it. Phil's got quite a lot to cover, so we'll keep the intro stuff short to get into things. Let's see, so I'll just say hello and make sure we've got people coming through. Yeah, it's looking to be quite a full session actually, with I think like 80 RSVPs or something like that. So a lot of people quite interested in this topic. All right, we've got a couple of highs. None of our regulars just yet, but welcome new people too.
Cool. Yeah, I just quickly want to just say that if you want to win the JetBrains license, you are going to have to get a Twitch account, and you're going to have to log in to the Sydney.net chat room, because basically
send me the link on there. I don't actually have that.
Okay. Basically, the first person that answers the question, that's who we normally award the licenses to. So if you're actually interested in the licenses, you're gonna have to stick around till the end, pay attention, and answer some questions.
Yeah, so you get to ask Phil questions at the end, or in fact, you can ask questions during, and I'll just surface your questions up onto the screen and just mention them to Phil at a point where I can interject them. Or you can ask at the end as well. But then at the end, we'll ask you 2 questions, which are for the JetBrains licenses. And the questions are based on the content of Phil's talk. So, listen closely. All right. Well, we seem to have at least, some people in the chat. So what do you think? Anything else you want to add, Francis, or should we get into things?
No, I think we've probably got a lot to cover, so let's just get on with it.
All right, so I'll just add Phil's screen in. Here we go, and put Phil at the top. Here we go. All right, well, over to you.
Okay, cool. Well, hello guys. It's been 6 months since I got here, but in the 6 months that I've been gone, I've been working on a few things. As it says on the tin, this session is not about how to use a chat client. It's not about how to prompt ChatGPT. There's lots of other places that do that. And I hate to disappoint a lot of people, but I will not be building an agent today. So I can't vibe code you out of this one. But what I can do is show you the building blocks of how to make tools by yourself with just the stuff that we already have available. I'll also talk about some of the things that I've built along with the different large language models that you could choose from as part of your everyday tool set. Keep in mind everything that you see here, aside from maybe Sublime text, and the tooling was really built by me for me, so it's not against anybody else. There are open source versions of the stuff that I'm building today, but it's not really to showcase what I've built as much as it is to show you some of the cool stuff you can build on your own if you happen to have the spare time, and this is more like your hobby, like me. Okay, so that being said, I'll walk you through this stuff. The good news is there's no slides, no bullshit. I'm just going to talk straight up and tell you exactly what I built, how I built it. You can ask me any questions at any time. You might have noticed at the very bottom that there's a URL that actually has the project with a sample HTTP client that connects to OpenRouter. Yes, with a live API key, but don't go crazy because it is a free one with a spending limit of $0. And I will be shutting that off at the end of the session. But if you wanted to play around with it, you can actually use it right now as we talk. Okay. Before I go on, anybody have any questions before I get started? Because the first section is really simple. It's like, how do you connect to an LLM and all the bullshit that is like, well, what's an LLM? If you're here, you probably already know that, so I'm not going to waste your time. But feel free to ask any questions before I continue.
Oh, good.
Okay.
I think.
Cool. All right, so let's start with the basic stuff. So, with everybody knows what large language models are, but from a developer standpoint, what actually happens under the hood when you're using a large language model client? Now, from a .NET standpoint, it's actually quite easy. If you have, with the code sample that I showed you there in that zip file, you'll see that inside of the solution, that is a fully working chat, not a fully working HTTP client that connects to OpenRouter and picks a specific model. At the end of the day, it's actually just as simple as an API that allows you to send open text questions, and it will respond with whatever the LLM you choose on whatever problem that you give it. Of course, there's a lot more complicated things like tooling and what agents do, but in the most simple sense, it is essentially a text-based query that you send out to a server, and it comes back with the response. What you do with that at that point is up to you. Now, most chat clients, what they tend to do is they format into JSON. That's okay. In my case, I don't really quite do that, and I'll show you what I actually do with it in a second. But if you really wanted to get started today, this client is what you would get started with, because yes, there are packages that you could use, like the OpenAI NuGet package that you pull it down. But I found that it might be overkill for me in my case, where I use a lot of text and I work with large language models and I do a lot of coding. So for me, I don't need all this stuff like audio. I don't know visual. I don't need tool calls, even though they do support that. I just needed something that could start planning things with, building stuff with, and it's all around that, basically coding. That's all I do with it, and a bit of planning and all the other stuff that comes with that. So let's go through this. So the first thing is, what do you need to get started with the NuGet packages? Now, the first one that you could do is look for the OpenAI package. There's also a package called Claudia. And if you look at Claudia NuGet, that refers to the unofficial Anthropic client API for .NET. That's also useful. There's also, I believe there's also one for Gemini, but there's a secret here in that the client that you see right now in that URL actually works for all of them. The reason why that works is for two reasons. Number one, you could access them all through OpenAI by changing the model name. The other thing I'll show you guys is OpenRouter. So the question that you're going to ask is, well, what if I don't want to use the top 4 AI companies? What if I don't want to use a Meta, or I want to use something that's open or OpenAI, or I don't want to use Gemini, or I want to try another company, maybe DeepSeek or another Minimax. So there's a lot of them. There's about 200 plus models. Now, in order to access that, you can go through OpenRouter. So hold on, let me just stop sharing my screen, and I'll share the screen with OpenRouter. So just to give you an idea of how much there actually is out there. So if you go to openrouter.ai, I'll bring this up, hopefully get this right. Now, this is openrouter.ai, as you can see. Now, I can pretty much type out anything. So if I wanted to do Grok, you got Grok 4. On each one of these pages, it actually tells you everything from pricing to TPS, which is tokens per second. That's actually important for throughput. For those of you that are uninitiated, roughly, it's not exact, but I've figured out roughly on average, one token is 3.5 bytes. And when it says 100.5, 0.7 TPS, you're looking at around 300 characters a second. It doesn't seem like a lot, but to give you an idea of how much computing power this thing takes up, my puny RTX 3070 can't barely do one or two TPS on one of the larger models. It's just ridiculous. That's why one of the first things that I did when I started thinking about should I run local or should I run remote, it was clearly obvious that I needed to run remote because I can't wait on one or two TPS, especially if we've got 4 or 5 queries running at the same time on my local machine, or even 50 at once. So OpenRouter is a great place. At the same time, um, it can be overwhelming. And the challenge I had when building my LLMs is that yeah, I could pretty much pick anything. If I do DeepSeek as the provider, it's got a couple there. I could go through so many of them. I think another one was Kimi 2, which is another popular or more recently popular one. And you can see everything varies, and they've got different providers um, per model. So, so one thing to keep in mind is that even DeepSeek LLMs themselves, I know there's huge controversy with them. Some of them being hosted in China, and people are being paranoid that they might leak it to the Communist Party and share their secrets. There are versions of DeepSeek that actually are hosted in the U.S. Like for example, I believe there's R1 1776. Now as you can see here, if I scroll down to Perplexity, it's actually two. So Perplexity hosts the R1 1776, which is a special build of DeepSeek that has been uncensored. So if you ask it politically sensitive questions about things in China, this one will actually answer them. Whereas the DeepSeek one is a bit more conservative and will not say anything that would upset the Communist Party.
What's the input and the output dollars, by the way, Phil?
Oh yeah. So here's the part that is I forgot to mention that. So input dollars is the cost per million tokens for the prompt when you send it up to the server. So if you send about a million tokens up cumulatively during a day, for example, or during one session, it'll cost you $2. Now the output price is different in that it charges you for the stuff it produces as a matter of inference.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually not bad. $8 for output. If you want to see something really crazy, let's look at Claude Opus. Oh, well, let's start with Claude Sonnet 4. Reasonable because it's one of the frontier models. You can see that the input is around $3 per million tokens, but the output is around $15 for a million tokens. Now that seems pretty expensive. But if you look at Claude Opus, you could see that it's Jesus Christ, it's like $75 for 1 million tokens, and it's quite like for me when I was purely vibe coding, or I tried vibe coding over the past 6 months, I was doing like 5 million tokens a day, easily.
Yeah.
So you can imagine I'd be running $500 a day, almost, just on this. But if I go to something like the cheaper models, like Gemini Flash, let's say Gemini Flash Lite, look at this. It's like 10, almost 20 times cheaper. So again, the second challenge that you're going to run into is right. You've got OpenRouter, you've got an HTTP client that actually could call out and ask questions. You can. Oh, the other thing is, if I go to this one, here's one thing that you probably should pay attention to, is you see this icon right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually just doing a copy of the actual string that you paste into the model name when you call the LLM. So for example, you look at that code sample that I posted on the channel in that zip file, you'll notice that I have a particular model there. You could copy that string and paste it in there, and it'll just change the model automatically. So that when you start up the program again, it'll call Flashlight. Of course, this is not the free version. That the API key that I gave out has no credits, and it's hard locked so that you can only use the free models. But as you can see, the principle is the same. If you wanted to browse through this manually, you can. But I found other ways that can do that. So 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 my overall strategy, if, or for anybody, if you're starting with large language model development, is think of it as number one, you're working with a standard HTTP client. Number two, you have to be careful about your model selection because you will run out of money if you pick the wrong one. Number three, the other part that I almost forgot to mention is you can call all three, pretty much any major LLM client because they use the OpenAI endpoints as the contract. So OpenRouter has APIs that make it. So if I search the docs here, I could say open. So I forgot where it was. This is OpenAI. So anyway, I'll take forever. The point here is that with every provider, whether it's ChatGPT, Anthropic, Gemini, OpenAI, of course, and OpenRouter, they all support the OpenAI endpoint as the standard. So the client that you see that I gave you, all you have to do is change the URL for the endpoint to point to whatever server that you want. It could be Gemini, it could be Anthropic, it could be OpenRouter in this case. Change the URL, plug in your API key and a custom model. You'll be able to use any one of the models that you see on this list.
By the way, Francis was mentioning Azure AI Foundry having more models. Have you got any thoughts on the AI Foundry one?
That's actually quite. I would love that, but I just don't have the money for that. I used to joke I only got 250 in my pocket, and that's actually true. But if I did, and I had if I had infinite amounts of money, I would actually ask for Azure AI Foundry with reserved instances. So they basically have the lanes reserved for me, so I could spam the shit out of it, and that's basically my private LLM instance that they have.
All right.
So that's actually good because those particular providers have security guarantees that you won't necessarily get directly through OpenRouter. Although I have heard that OpenRouter does use Azure Foundry in some instances to get access to the LLMs in bulk, as well as other providers. So, for example, that's why you can see. Let me see Claude. They've got. If I type in hosted, for example, sometimes they've got hosts that are actually hosted privately and not actually shared with the wider audience. So that's the other thing to consider. But that's it for selection of the actual large language models. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to the other stuff, some of the stuff that I built? I haven't tried Hugging Face yet, by the way, but I would think that it wouldn't be too hard for me to switch if I really just change the URL. And that's the point. Just keep in mind that there's a lot of different implementations with how people choose to work with their LLMs. But overall, it's roughly the same. This is how I started, where I started with text. You could branch off into audio and video and all the other stuff, but the simplest possible thing that would cover for like 80 or 90% of the cases for developers like me that are just more into the text side and content generation, the text part, you can get away with just using these large language models. Now, that being said, what I built, to give you a bit more context, is I'll show you. Let me just. I'll put in the URL, but let me show you what I built in the open source side of things. And I built. Okay, so this was the one. I'll post this. Where can I post this? Here, Francis, just share the link because I don't actually have. I can't type into the Twitch stream for some reason. Right. Okay, so what you could do is you could search GitHub for Eleminster, the double LMINSTR. Now this is a bit old, like 8 or 9 months old. This was what my current LLM client was originally built on. The premise is that I had different C# scripts that you could see here that were corresponded to a different provider that it would connect to. Now, the reason why I built this particular client back in the day, well, it feels like forever, but 9 months is like forever in AI land.
Yeah.
Is I actually got tired of working with ChatGPT. I got tired of working with AI Studio because when I wanted to save whatever the stuff that it generated, I was trapped within that context window. I was trapped within that UI. Now, what every single one of these scripts do is they save your context to disk. So what do you think happens when I can do things like, for example, I can switch between, if you scroll down here, I can switch between 3 or 4 different models at once, and everything that each model generates is actually stored on disk in a markdown file. Now, the reason why I did this is because I needed to work within Sublime Text, and I needed to work within an environment that I didn't need the flashy stuff. I just wanted the bare metal. I wanted to get working with multiple large language models at once and not have to worry about the JavaScript or the client code sitting there just waiting for this thing to come back. So you can load and use this as much as you want. It's a bit old, but it still works the same way as that client that client code that you see. Now, what I built with 9 or 10 months later is a bit different. What I did was I actually built something kind of similar to a Unix command line prompt, but it's kind of a mashup between the Unix command line and something running within Sublime Text. Now you might say, why do you do that? Well, I wanted to treat thought itself as if I was working with a Git tree. I wanted to make it so that when I'm working with a large language model client, I could either go down one path, revert, go down another path, and have these non-linear conversations where it feels a little bit more like how I would work as a developer. So for example, like today I was using it at work. I had 3 different items that I was working on, and each one was a different topic of conversation that I need to explore. And I'll show you this in a second. But the idea was in normal ChatGPT or pick your favorite client or Grok, doesn't matter. This is all the same across all of them. What you'll find is that it's quite linear. It's a linear buffer that goes all the way up. And what most people do is when you get to when the buffer's full, you throw it away because you can't really do anything with it. It's either you take it as is, and the bigger it grows, the more likely that the large language model that you're working with, no matter how good it is, gets confused, it forgets details, the quality suffers once you go past a certain limit of tokens. So it's not a great experience. And that's when people are saying, this thing's gotten dumber, but it hasn't gotten really dumber. The weights are still the same. It's just there's too much context for it to sift through, and it starts to forget things. I don't know what the exact number is. It differs per model, but I think the practical limit in some studies that I've seen is like 60K tokens. And I'm making that number up, but there's a limit where you could say that past 50 or 60K tokens, it remembers everything, but the more closer you get to past 120, that's when it starts stuffing up and forgetting details. And that's when you're like, oh God, why is it hallucinating and all the other stuff? So I found a solution to that actually, I'm not going to say fixes the problem, but it makes it go away in a unique way that somebody that like a developer like me could pretty much relate with, and it's, in fact, everybody uses it. It's called Git. That being said, before I jump into it, I'll give a quick demo of what it is. Does anybody have any questions so far? Because we got a lot to get through. Okay, cool. Right, so let me go ahead and share my humble Sublime Text instance. What you don't see is the daemon that actually, or the actual process that runs underneath all of this. Now, how this works, my large language model clients works is that it's completely headless. There's no UI. In fact, under the hood is a very, very sophisticated file watcher that shuffles data from the backend data store to Sublime Text. So what you're going to see here is just nothing but text editor. But you'll see in a bit that it's not quite like anything you might have seen before. I'll explain to you. Okay, so how this works out is, as you can see, I'll share my screen here with just Sublime Text. So obviously you can see this, right? This is just my Sublime Text instance. This is just some random page that I've got that has my talk notes on it. But you'll notice that I have two other tabs. Now, you're going to have to forgive me because normally I work on 4 screens and it uses the entire width, and I actually have this spread across multiple screens, but I'll try my best to do this. So I have 4 screens. I've got one for questions, which is one window I enter in all my questions. I've got another window for the answers, because I found that when I ask a question and then the LLM responds, I might need to take the code out of that answer window and then paste it somewhere else and test it. I also have the system prompt, which here is just tells me the messages that come out of the system as I'm working with it. Now, keep in mind that this can work on any text editor. I just pick Sublime Text because it's got this really simple reload feature that if it detects a file change, it'll just reload it. Now, the other part that you're not going to see is that I actually have 2, not one, but 2 Stream Decks with 32 buttons on each side that have all the macros on this thing. So if I show you, for example, if I show you the commands that I've got on this, there's like 50. This is a full-on shell. So if I do command.help, you'll see that this looks like I'm just typing this in the text editor, but in the background it's actually detecting the command being saved to a text file, and it goes through an entire pipe in detection, and then it outputs it to your system file, my system file, which gives me this really, it's kind of ugly, but if I zoom out, you could see that there's an entire help page that shows all the commands that I've got for this shell. Now, why do I have this? So everything in this particular client is about manipulating thought and working with prompts and being able to move forward and move backward and to actually work with an entire session as a tree of thoughts. I think there's a paper on that somewhere, though, but it's quite similar. The difference is that this is more towards a developer like me. So I might have a help command like this. As I pointed out, you might want to see what LLMs are there. So one thing I do is I could just list all the LLMs. This is already connected into OpenRouter. So if I go here, you'll see it's formatting shit, but you could see that I've got quite a few. Oh yeah, this is not all of it, but wait a second, let me go online. Okay. So there's also an offline mode here, but the idea is that if I'm on online mode and I'm in a plane, or online mode and I'm not, I can actually, I've got connection. I can connect to a large language model client. If I'm on a plane, I can just go offline and still enter stuff in. So the way this thing works is it's got the online and offline mode. But the interesting part is when I'm offline, it becomes like a notepad, and it stores whatever I type in a backend. So effectively, I'm talking to myself and putting down notes. in a linear fashion. Now, the part here that is actually hard to visualize until I show you is why would you do it like this? Why do I actually have this very narrow interface where I shuffle things in and out of it? And that's the part that is different, which is the idea of trees and having these multiple trees within a single bundle, and every single tree has a set of thought vectors, which is this idea that it's this long chain of prompts that gives you this information. So, for example, if I list all the bundles I got, I think I did one on China. No, sorry, that's the wrong one. But let me see if I list all my bundles here. I think I've got one on. Yeah, I've got one. I did one on the sample one, and the idea here is. So as you can see, a lot of this stuff is highly customized. I'm never going to sell this simply because nobody's going to be crazy enough to actually want this, because I've got my 2 Stream Deck XLs here. If I look at this, I've got 3 trees in one file. Now the interesting thing here is how I manage the tokens. You could see that it has the node count, which is effectively, you can think of a node as that one block of text or that comes back or that you send to the large language model client. So, or another way they call it is one turn. So when you say that you send off a question, that's one turn, and then when the LLM responds, that's another turn. So I've got around 18 nodes. Now this seems a bit weird doing this, but when I actually cut over to, say, the China one, and let me just do a quick one and then switch to one on China. And I did this just out of my own curiosity and see how much of a conversation I could fork in about different directions. Now the interesting part here is that when I load this tree, okay, fine, I got the access to the China tree. If I list all the branches in this tree, this is the part where it's different. And sorry, it took me a while to actually get to this, but take a look here. If I zoom in, do you see anything different about this actual conversational thread? It's not linear. I even marked the spot here where you say, well, this is the starting point, but here it forks in about different, like for example, these are all prompts. And I try to keep a cumulative token count, but you could see that it's, depending on which path you follow in the tree, doesn't always take up all the space. The interesting part is I could go all the way down to, say, here, and you know how Git has those commit IDs I could actually check out? So I could do, so I could check this out like this because I had that, and then all of a sudden I'm able to see what is in that particular node. This is exactly like Git.
Mm-hmm.
The other interesting thing is I could roll back and go up the tree and ask another question. And it would fork in that direction. And the interesting part is that a linear context window doesn't apply anymore in this case. And one of the emergent things that I'm starting to realize is that because I work this way, my number of tokens at any given time stays under 30K. Why? I'll explain to you why here. So let's say I'm here, and this goes to the whole context management thing. So let's look at the diagnostic behind this. So I'm at this particular point. This is at the very bottom of the tree as one turn. This is what the large language model responded with. If I do, let's see, I'll type this out manually because this is probably the more interesting one. So if I do a diagnostic log on this one and I do a complete dump, for example, you could see that I've got the token count here on the side. every single one of these gaps that you see is one node. So if you were working with a linear chat history, you're everything that you see here, you're pretty much stuck with. And for me, the reason why I have the token counts on the side is that if it gets too long, I need to know how much space I got left. But the interesting part is that when you start working with context and thinking of them as trees, I can take something like this where it looks like a long chain of text of nodes, and I can go all the way up to, say, up here. And then I can just do a checkout. And then it's back here. If I do another diagnostic log, wait, just give me a sec. So if I do this, all of a sudden, you could see what happened to my context window count and my token count. I went from having 2,000 or however many tokens, and now because I did a revert or I checked out to a specific branch, my context window just shrunk dramatically. I could also ask another question from this point, and that's how it works from here. If I just stop typing these meta commands and I say, well, what can you tell me about, oh, wait, let me just go online first. Double check that it's online. Okay. And then if I type out, what can you tell me that is special about Chinese culture, for example, I'm just making shit up. It'll sit there for a while. It'll take around 20 seconds, depending on the model. And then it comes back. Now, there's no, as I said before, there's no actual UI here. So I do rely on the actual daemon to tell me when things come back. It should have come back by now, if I did it right.
There you go.
There you go. And if I look at where I am, for example, so you could see that effectively all I did was I took this point and I branched off of there, and it went off in a completely different direction. So the reason why this is so useful is, as a developer, when you're trying to do things like, I need to explore an idea, but you don't want to lose context, you don't have that many choices to work with. This one allows you to go back and work with and explore other options. The other cool thing, before I continue, does anybody have any questions? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you can do, and keep in mind that this is just changing the way you work with context windows. I just treated it as a non-linear buffer, and I can move back and forth like a Git tree.
I've got a question, actually.
Yeah.
When you said this was going in another direction, like, how can I tell whether that's going in another direction or not?
Yeah, because I'm still working on this one, but if you wanted to map the whole thing, I've got a command here that basically says list branches, for example. It's not to fix how it actually enters the text, but essentially when it lists the branches, it'll go here. I could also go back up and look at the tree in itself. So if I do navigation, reset, all the way to the top, just like do a git reset hard. Of course, it's going to say it's fine. But if I list it again, you could see that everything there and you could pretty much, it's got the addresses here, so you could check out at any point and then fork off of these branches.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep.
So, but the cool stuff happens because all this stuff is immutable. And everybody knows, what can you do with immutable data structures? You could parallelize the shit out of it. And that's the beautiful part. I can do stuff like, is everybody familiar with fanning in and fanning out? So if I do, I'll explain. Maybe the help command is a bit. So there's a command here called fan in. Actually, I'll do fan out. And this is one of those cool things that I've always wanted to do with your ChatGPT or pick your favorite client that it can't do. But it's really damn useful. So fan out works like this. The command is basically saying, using either the current large language model or pick another one from the list that I have, I want to ask up to 4 questions. And I want to ask 4 questions from the same starting point, but it's going to fork in 4 different directions. It's going to create a separate node underneath the one with an answer to each one of those 4 questions, for example. I'm sorry. I'll increase the font size, but again, the principle here is the same. I capped it at 4 because my brain's very finite. I don't ask too many questions. So fan out is, I would ask 4 questions, and the answer to the question will be nodes that will be appended to the current spot where I am in the tree. Now, conversely, the part that's also useful is the idea of fan in. I want to take 4 different outputs and synthesize it into one input. The idea there is it's the opposite, where I say I've got one large language model, I've got one prompt that is the synthesis prompt that is applied to every single one of them, or basically says, here's the contents of, say, branch 1, 2, 3, and 4, and based on that, give me the overall combined perspective. So, for example, if you had a question about China, and it came from a political, social, economic, cultural perspective, you could do something like, based on all this information, what should a Westerner like me be aware of China? And what it would do is it would take all those different perspectives and then combine them into one result and then make that the child. And then it's almost like you're merging with Git. There are other things that this also does, but keep in mind, everything you see here is just within Sublime Text. There's no UI whatsoever.
What about with code, Phil? How do you use it with code? Does it change your files, or do you just copy paste?
It does not. I copy paste. Yeah. So I know there's agentic stuff out there that does the coding for you, and that is certainly available with Klein Cursor or Codex or Claude Code. There's a lot, or Gemini CLI. But this is a different approach. This is for me. I wanted to take something where I have complete control over what is produced. How does this work for code? So, for example, when I'm doing a fan out, if I ask, so this one would be, give me a second. And saying reload. Okay, so I've got fan out. I'll give you an example question I might ask. So it's a ask.fan out. Current. Okay, write tests that prove that this works. Check this method for bugs. What else? How do I make this more secure?
Mm.
So the idea here is that there's this helps because you could have those four different perspectives, and because since everything is running in parallel,
Mm-hmm.
it means that I can ask four questions at the same time, and I don't have to worry about concurrency issues either. It'll actually just write out to the tree, and I could just jump back and forth in between them.
Yes, and your context doesn't fill up as well with all the other ones which are not relevant for the other question.
Yes, and the other thing is I could go up the tree, or another. Here's a classic one. Okay, so I didn't actually cover this, but it's worth mentioning too. So, does anybody have any solution for hallucinations? This is an open question. How do you solve for hallucinations in any large language model client? Nobody's been able to answer this. And I have a solution for this. And the solution for this is actually you roll back. So, for example, if you start to notice that the large language model is starting to make, if you start seeing this making hallucinations, what you do is you just go up the tree, you ask it the same question all over again, and then see if it actually comes up with a better response, or you change your prompt so that you effectively sidestep its output, and you don't have to live with it. So even in that sense, just being able to do an O of one in constant time of a rollback allows you to completely obliterate hallucinations because you could basically do a git discard of whatever the hell this thing just said and then start all over again.
Do you usually, if you give the same prompt, does it usually hallucinate again, or?
No, it's usually, I've seen that it tends to hallucinate more when the context window gets really large and it starts to lose information.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, what you can't, as somebody else pointed out, you can be more precise with what you ask. What the traditional approach to solving hallucinations is they provide more context in the form of RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, so that in theory the LLM is actually working off of information that it has instead of having to invent it. But with this approach, where you actually have almost like a Git tree, if it doesn't actually respond with relevant information, you could just roll back and try asking it a different way. Which, for me, at least in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is that's more practical, because you could either, in the next prompt where you try it again, you could actually add more information,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when you're like, okay, then that's what makes a lot more sense. At the same time, with this approach with context management, this actually, I dare say, it's better than RAG, because I don't have to worry about injecting stuff. I could actually shrink the context window by just moving up the tree when I want to go into other types of explorations within the same conversation. So, for example, with this whole conversation I made up about China, what I could do is, if I wanted to know about the culture or different aspects of China, I could go up to the point in the tree and check it out there, and then branch off and go all the way down again. So there's what I would say about context management is, if you the doors start to open up when you stop thinking about it as a linear buffer. And what I've learned is that Git is probably the one that everybody uses, but it's been right under our noses the whole time. Like, everybody uses Git, but nobody thinks of their actual context window as Git. But when you start thinking of it as Git, you could do all the stuff that Git does, which is check out, merge, rollback, branch, fork, reset. I mean, all the things that I built this on are built around the idea that I have full control over context, because that's probably as they say, context is king, and even more so within the space of working with building your own tools. Now, hypothetically, if something like this were plugged into a agent, by the way, if you see this video, I'm taking offers starting at 100 million. um, no, but seriously, if you plug this into a with the right tweaks, where you plug this into a coding agent, the coding agent in theory wouldn't never run out of memory, because if with the right APIs, this thing would go back and forth and be able to pull out the right context at the right time, and it would never have to worry about the memory getting full, because you could just shrink the context when you need to, jump back to different files when you need to, or you completely discard certain branches of thought when it gets to that point where you don't need it anymore, but you still want to have perfect recall. So again, this is my 6-month project, but for me, it was all about how do I build something that would be useful for me. I'm not out to sell this. That's the difference. This was just how do I make myself a better developer and better AI developer, if you want to call it that, so that if I had questions and I wanted to go down different paths of exploration, I would be able to save everything that I thought about and came up with, and undo some things if it didn't come out the way I thought it would come out. And that's what this does. I mean, there's still stuff that I have to do with this, but effectively, this is the basic version. It does some really interesting things with manipulating these huge context trees. There's also the part I didn't really cover, which is multiple trees per bundle, where you could have different aspects of a particular business that you have notes on that you could switch between trees. There's also future versions where I could actually take, I've got handlebars, the so-called mustache templates, where I could point to another part of a tree in another bundle and say, well, inject this, because prompting is also important. Again, there's a lot of stuff that you could do with this one, but this was where, for me, I spent a good 2-3 months just building this out and staying up until 2 a.m. in the morning, even beyond points where I probably should have already slept. But as you can see, this was like my passion project, because I wanted to build something that would be useful for myself. I didn't care if it was never going to be profitable. This was just for me. And then in this session, hopefully you get a sense of what you could actually build with these tools. And again, it all starts with an HTTP client. So that code that you see there in the zip file, that's where you get started. What you build with it is up to you, and please use your own API keys, because after this session, I'm turning that damn thing off. And that's it. Let me just go through my notes and see if I covered everything. So, the other thing is, how do you pick the right LLM model? How do you do that? The cool thing that I did, and that's just more for me, just to show this one off, is if I do a list for large language model clients, this is the coolest thing that I geek out over, is that this can automatically select the best large language model client. That, when I say best, that is the balance between smart, cheap, and fast. So you could see here, there's a few things here that it's got the input token. Sorry, let me just zoom in. It's shit because I'm not used to working with like this tight screen space, but you could see that it has the input token cost here, the output token cost there. I can also do comparisons between two models. For example, let me just see if I could actually do something like let me just do Opus. No, this one, this is the part that threw me off, because as I pointed out in the beginning, like I struggled trying to pick the right model, because it's almost like your favorite it's like your favorite soccer team. Everybody has their favorite one that they want to use. I went to a site called artificialanalysis.ai, which actually has an API with all the scores for every single model that's out there. Now, I wrote an algorithm that actually balances around 50 different criterias. And I'm not going to get into the details of that algorithm, but essentially what it does is it weighs all these ones against each other and gives me a set of rankings. So let's see. I got Opus. Let me see the one that won. See, if you zoom out here, you can't see it, but I'll just say what it is. So this one, it actually marks out the fastest model, Maverick Free. Although I'm not sure about this one because it's kind of flaky. It's a combination between the smartest one and the fastest one. So if I do like this one, let's see if this works.
Maybe just make it a bit bigger if you would feel.
I will. Okay, it doesn't know the Opus model, but let me see if. See DS. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which model can I go with. Okay, just give me a sec. Actually, let me try this one. This is a bit quicker. So I do have rankings for models that I can do quickly. Okay, so it is buggy. Anyway, so let me try. GPT 4.0. Okay, so here you go. So what I could do, because it calls the APIs, is that these scores that you see here, like MMLU, GPQA, Humanities Last Exam, all these things are actually posted on the site. Every single model that comes out, from Grok 4 to whatever Grok 10, until these benchmarks are pretty much in the 99, you'll start to see what their scores are. So as you can see here, GPT-4o is an older version from OpenAI. It doesn't score as well as O4 Mini, but this kind of thing allows me to objectively choose between them in a way that makes sense, because it takes away all the guessing and it automatically chooses for me. Now, as more of an FYI for you guys, if you really want to pick the dirt cheapest AI LLM that is cheap, but it's just as good as Opus, let me see here. It's actually DeepSeek R1. Let me just pull that up. Give me a sec, because that takes a little bit. So it's actually DeepSeek here. It's DeepSeek R1 0528. So you can see that this one, if I could zoom in, 0528 is 80 cents per million and for input, and $4 per output. Now, to give you an idea of how good this one is, it's at the same level as Claude Opus, which is $75. And I can't remember, and I think 15 for input. So you could see you can get Opus level performance just by picking the right models that you see here. And again, you don't have to have my client. You could actually just browse through OpenAI or OpenRouter, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff. Now the point here is all this stuff. I mean, everybody here has access to the same thing I have. There's nothing that I presented here that is like cutting edge or revolutionary that you can't do yourself. And that's the whole point, right? If you care enough about being able to build this kind of stuff, or you're just really interested like me, I mean, it's worth the time. Certainly if that's where you want to go. And I don't want people to think that it's just for chat. A lot of the stuff that I built is not for chat at all. It's really, I've got an idea. I want to bounce things off a large language model. I also want to design stuff, but I want to look at it from about 5 or 6 different angles, and I might not use the same model to do it. And this is how I do that. So maybe at some point I'll put together, I'll put together a highly modded version of an agent. But for now, this is good for me because I know exactly what I need to do in terms of prompts. It's just I needed to work at a level where I had 100% control, and I wasn't satisfied with the web client. So that's me. That's my that's my pet project for quite some time now, and it's still going to develop over time. So, but hopefully you guys learned a lot from this because there's a lot of things that you can build just from a simple HTTP client, just like I did. Maybe not as much because you didn't spend as much time as I did, but if you did, I'm sure you could come up with something better than whatever I just put together here. So,
Phil,
any questions?
Yeah, question on in your presentation in January, like you're cutting together all the files and sending it in as a context for the coding side. So
yes,
I didn't see that today. Is that a change, or you still doing that sort of thing, or?
I do, yes. But the difference is that unlike before, where I would dump the entire code base and then I'd be stuck with the context, I could just revert and then undo it. So I might have one prompt that says, well, I need your help. I'm designing this one thing. Take a look at the code. And then the next question would be, take a look at the code. Tell me what you see. And then I'd take whatever findings it has, take that summary, and then branch back up. And then all of a sudden, it's like it was never there, and just take the findings and say, well, you go back to the large language model client, and you could say, well, I just asked you about this. This is what you said about the code. What can we do from here?
Mm-hmm.
So I still do that, even more so now because the context is pretty much free. I've found, as I said, when I work with this style of context management, my tokens usually stay under 30K because I keep going back up the tree and asking different questions rather than lugging around this thing that's like 1 million tokens and then I'm paying through the nose because I can't shrink it.
Yep. And
because
also,
other approaches tend to summarize all 1 million tokens, but I found that because LLMs tend to miss details, it's very unreliable. What I prefer to do is just cut the context out and just jump up the tree and say, right, so since we already looked at that topic, where else can we go? And I don't have to drop any context. I could go back to it later. That's actually more valuable.
All right, sounds good. Maybe go to the chat for any more questions, or start on questions. Go for it, guys and ladies. Oh, you want to go ahead, Francis?
Yeah. I got I think one of the questions was, I think when you were showing the fan out example and you were running about 3 or 4 was it questions or answers in parallel? But I was just wondering, is it actually cheaper to do that in your kind of fan out example when you had like a couple of things that you wanted to kind of fire off in parallel? Is it actually cheaper to do that?
It can be, because what you would have to do, it can be but not in the ways that you would expect, and I'll explain. It's cheaper because what I've run into with your typical chat sessions is like, how many people here have run into the problem where you have to explain the whole damn thing all over again in a new session?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I can jump back,
Yep.
I can say, well, this is what you need to know at this point in time. I don't have to explain things all over again. So it might not be just the token cost. It's just the time of not having to explain.
Yeah.
I've got this project. Here's the context. In fact, at work, one of the cooler things I was able to do is I produced, like, the first few turns. I went offline. I said, here's the information you need to know about me. Here's what I'm working on. here's what you need to know. Here's the project, and then from there I would branch it around 6 different directions, and it would have all that context. Now imagine if I had to do that with ChatGPT, I would have to explain everything all over again and try to paste that. And sometimes the thing that scared me that I just discovered recently is like, holy shit, Copilot has a character limit of 8K. Like my code base is not going to fit in 8K. I could do it in terms like that, but that's like trying to fit, something the size of a dam through a straw. It's not going to work. But in this particular case, since I have full control of the client and I have full control of the directions it might go, that's the part that excites me because I can do all this stuff that would be really difficult otherwise. And I encourage everybody on the call to try building not what I built, but try different things because it's not just agents. It's not just chat. There's a lot of stuff you could do with this, and it could solve a lot of problems depending on which direction you take it. So, knock yourself out, guys.
Okay, cool. I think George just asked a question, so I've got another quick question, but we can come back to me later.
All right, so George's question, would you combine this approach with GraphRag to benefit from both approaches for context management?
Not familiar with GraphRag, but explain it to me without me having to Google it. Or maybe it's just like
it's kind of like similar to what you have, but I think maybe the difference is.
Well, I'll try to answer.
There's like a sort of like a kind of search going on in the background, and then you're kind of waiting on the results to come back.
I'll try to make an educated answer to this one, but I'll admit that I'm not familiar with GraphRag. Now, one of the things I explored with options for context management is this thing with embeddings and search and doing that kind of approach where I could index all my information and have this kind of fuzzy calculated lookup. But I decided against it, more for philosophical reasons than practical ones. And the reason why is I wanted everything to be 100% deterministic. So that means that if I was going to search for one particular thing, I know exactly where to find it, and it wasn't a one-off, or it wasn't because of some odd, higher dimensional calculation. Now, if GraphRag is similar to what I have, the only thing I've really done here is copy Git. I have immutable trees. I could go up and down the tree. I could branch, fork, and it's the same semantics. If I wanted to scale this up to, say, 1,000,000 thought nodes or 1,000,000 vectors with a vector being the top point of the tree to the very edge, or any arbitrary 2 points, this is the really useful kind of approach that would get you, I dare say, to an ASI. And I don't say that lightly, because an ASI or an AGI needs immutable memory to prevent corruption. It also needs the ability to recall memory at a 100% success rate. You can't always do that with embeddings. And the worst part is you can't explain why. With something like this, if you have enough of these trees built up and you had a system in place that allowed it to recursively reflect on it and build more and more trees, and yes, you get something that gets bloody smart and it's just a bunch of trees. That's the crazy part. But that's a different discussion. Hopefully that answers my question, but if it doesn't, well, I'm always available on LinkedIn. You ping me. I love talking about this stuff. Yeah, actually, to answer your question, if it holds your code knowledge graph, yes, it's very similar. In fact, it's similar, except in this case, everything is immutable. You'll notice that when I was going through this stuff, there's no delete function at all. When I make a mistake, I revert, go up the tree, but all the ugly nodes still stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea there is, because it's all immutable, I could run hundreds of parallel instances without actually corrupting anything. And that's going to be good later if I create a super intelligent brain that has 1,000,000 thoughts per second. So, That's the idea, or that's the dream.
Francis, you want to ask your other question?
Yeah. Just I think when you were talking about making the, kind of choosing you're saying something about this would help me choose the best model for me. Were you referring to OpenRouter then? What was this? What was that thing that was going to help you make the,
I,
help you choose the best model for you?
so there's different models for different purposes, obviously. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you've got a lot of context to process through or a lot of things to summarize, I would recommend the Gemini models because of their large context windows. They go up to, depending on which one, there's either 1 million or 2 million tokens, but effectively, let's just say 500K to be safe. But there are other models that are really smart, like the Claude Sonnet and Opus, where they come up with some really ingenious things. Or a good example is some of the other more like the models that I use with at work, where I ask Opus or Sonnet some really hard problem, and it comes back to me and says, "Oh, you don't need to do that. You just do this," and it still follows the Agni Solid Dry and Kiss. Um, and I was shocked because today I was working on something, and I was thinking it was going to be this big proof of concept, and all of a sudden it just spit out this one thing that says this is it, and I was like, wait a second, that doesn't look right, because this is like one page of code, and it said no, that's it, and that's the result of being able to pick the right model. But that being said, there are other models that are dumb as bricks. Anything below 1B is dumb as bricks. I'm sorry to say. Even 8B, maybe. There's some coder models like the Quinn models that are good at 8 billion parameters, but that's pushing it. And you could run some of them locally, but for my purposes, I can run the 8B models locally, but it just I save more money just by running OpenRouter remotely, so I don't have to worry about the management, and I don't have to have even the right hardware. I can just use it from any machine, and that for me that's more important.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions from the crowd, or we'll wrap it up and I'll ask you questions?
Well, I'll answer one question. It says, "What problem did I try to solve initially?"
Yeah.
Problem was I fucking hated Gemini Studio. um, and I hated ChatGPT, at least the client, because there's so much stuff that I wanted to work on, and I had to jump back and forth. I wanted to code stuff, and then it just didn't really fit the way I worked. So I just kind of sat there and said, well, if I wanted to build a client that works for me, I'm not trying to sell it to 1 million people. What do I want? I don't need the flashy stuff. I need stuff that allows me to switch workflows very quickly and code stuff in a way that makes sense for me. Um, and kind of a selfish thing is, I do have 2 Steam Decks with 32 buttons on each one, and I just wanted to see how cool it would be if I had it programmable, and then I could just kind of basically have an IDE with 64 programmable keys with infinite depth. So there's always the geeky side of me that says, hey, you know what? There's no practical reason, but I just wanted to build it. And to be clear, I've spent my whole career building practical shit, and like 2% of that was not really fun stuff. So this is kind of me turning things around and saying I'm just building stuff for fun.
We did have one from Andrew before about comparisons to VS Code, Copilot, Klein as well.
I have not used VS Code Copilot, but my long-term project at some point is to completely rip out the memory model for Klein and replace it with what I've got here.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, if I plug this stuff into Klein, which is why I'm plugging this for a good 100 million, by the way, I'll take offers starting there. If I plug this into Klein, you basically have something that never forgets, and it could do these long-term refactors over weeks and be able to recall stuff like you just would have we got up for coffee and just sat back down like 2 months later, because with this kind of memory where it can just recall any bunch of code at any given time, then that changes your typical coding agent from something that codes small things to building complete refactorings where it could branch out 100 different ways and pick the branch that actually works. So, for example, if you wanted to do one that uses an actor system, you want to do one that does REST, you want to do one that does GraphQL, it would be able to look at all the different directions at once and still recall every single bit of code and every single branch. That's the cool thing. I haven't gotten to that yet because I just don't have the time. But to answer your question, Andrew, yeah, that's on my bucket list, and it's free for 100 mil. No, and I'm just kidding because with all the stuff with Cursor and then the crazy amounts of money that they're actually selling this stuff for, these kinds of things, it just blows my mind what you could actually do with it if you plugged it in. But that's for a different discussion. If I ever get to that, then I'll show people. But like a dream.
All right, it's 8:15, so I guess we better get to the questions in the other direction. So just quickly, some questions here before we wrap up. So easy one first. Which system was Phil using for like AI abstraction layer? So you could switch out different services, AI services. Both questions are going to be pretty easy. Yeah, so put your answer in the chat. Do you need another license? Yeah, you could say models. Yep, different models. But Andrew got it. You need another license, Andrew? It means I need to find another question if you don't want the license. All right. Next question is, so what was Phil suggesting as like a alternative structure for your context window rather than a linear structure in terms of like the model? Yes, you can answer incorrectly only if you don't want a license.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Right, you confused the issue, friends. All right, so what's the model that Phil was talking about, right? So the ChatGPT model, or most of them use a linear model. What's Phil suggesting? What would you call the data structure or the model of interaction and data storage?
It's not a queue, I'll give you that.
Thanks, Francis.
It's on the linked list. It doesn't get any love.
Close, but it's not it.
Maybe no one wants a license these days. Everyone's got a license.
It's probably
Everyone's
safe for
rich,
humanity
so
if you don't remember. It's okay. It's like me with Men in Black and just holding it up. You don't remember this.
If you don't want a license and you still want to put in the right answer, just put it in so that Phil knows that people are listening.
This is going to be found by somebody who's like, oh, at some point.
Is the answer supposed to be no?
Andrew, yes. Good. I'm glad people really were listening. Maybe no one wants a license. Oh, well, all right. Well, you definitely deserve one because you answered 2 questions. So, all right, I'll send you one of those. Maybe does anyone else want a license in the chat or not?
My God, we're giving it away. Now we're begging people to take it.
Oh, hang on, that's my kid's bedtime alarm. Turn that off. All right.
By the way, if you do get a license, can you please redeem it? Because we got into trouble a few months ago because people were holding it. JetBrains were like, "What are you doing?" And they threatened to take away our licenses. Please don't do that.
Yeah, so you need to claim it soon after you get it.
You have to claim it. Yeah, if you're going to get it and use
decide.
it.
The answer will be yes.
Oh.
All right.
It's like there's no other question. It's like, do you want a license? Yes or no? Raise your hand. No.
Oh my god.
I guess everyone's license. We've saturated the user group with licenses.
We've been giving away so many licenses over the years. I think half of us, the Sydney developers community, got a JetBrains license from us. Everyone.
Yeah. So, well, thank you very much, Phil, for sharing your concepts and ideas and showing how it worked as well. Yeah, I certainly found it very interesting. I think some of the takeaways for me were like the tiny size of the token window that you're trying to do, right? So that then, because you can go up the tree, you don't end up with your own questions, then filling up the context window with junk. Instead, you go back to the root again, so that you can ask afresh. So whether you've got a tool for that, or whether you're using it, just with more context windows, you can kind of do something a bit like that with the projects in Claude Code. But you obviously can't go up and down so easily, but you can have a base context that you start off the chats from. So I think that is quite interesting for me as well. As well as the variety of models, which I don't usually use. And in fact, the whole concept of the tree as like a thought model rather than the linear model is quite amazing. So yes, thank you very much for sharing.
I guess I'll see you guys when I build a AI a coding.
Yeah, when you take off.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. You got any last words, Francis?
Yeah, I think some of the things you said are actually quite profound things, and I think what people don't realize is no one is talking about this, or no one is. If they are, I think if people know about this, no one is talking about it public, and everyone's kind of like holding this as their secret source. But I think, Phil, it's really commendable that you've actually shared this with everyone. I think not many people might have done what Phil has done. So yeah, again, you'll always have my gratitude.
The tree model's really outside the box, right?
Yeah.
It's not
in
the usual services at all.
Yeah, I think hopefully this will. I know sometimes as engineers, like we probably have very conflicted about AI, but I think it's kind of pretty clear to me that it's not something that you can avoid any longer as an engineer. So I think it's time to embrace it, and hopefully what Phil has just shown you is actually giving you 3-4 steps ahead of other people, like in terms of the head start. So yeah, just use this gift wisely, I think.
All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone, and especially to Phil, of course. And if anyone else has any talks that they want to give, then get in touch via Meetup or email or whatever. And I think we're pretty much full for the next few months, but we're definitely
we're pretty booked. I think we're booked up till October. I think we've got the next couple of months. We've got I've been pretty lucky every time I approach someone about a talk, everyone has said yes. I think the only slot we might have left is November, and I think December we'll try and reserve it for like the Christmas drinks or something.
Yeah, I think so. The traditional Christmas drinks, where we actually.
What I'm looking forward to. Just joking, but yeah, absolutely. So I think we got one more slot this year. So yeah, I think don't be shy. I think, especially if you want to present something, but you've never presented before. I know exactly what sort of fears and procrastination and so on, emotions kind of go through. So I'm more than happy to help you guys out. If you've got something you want to present, but you find it a bit daunting, definitely. Well, this is like a safe space to do it. You're not going to find a more safer space than alt.net, I think. So.
Good. All right. So good night, everyone, and we will see you next month. Same online place, probably.
All right. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See you.